And those companies you generally find are very receptive, I think, to strategic partners with black investors, because they need the help and they recognize they need it. A third are probably absolutely clueless. They actually have no idea. They're well-meaning, but they just don't even know where to start, which is pretty frightening 15 years into the new South Africa, but it's a reality. And again, I think the issue there is how long is it going to take to transform that company. And again, maybe it's just too much effort. And then a third are probably, I'd say, the cynics. They have a particular mind view. They are there to tick the boxes, but no more. And in many cases, they try and effectively take advantage of the black partner, either in pricing or in terms of the way that they structure the deals. Martin's point about taking the 25% and dividing it amongst the renter crowd of 25 million beneficiaries. Frankly, who's kidding whom here? It might make the headline, but actually it really is a divide and rule strategy. There just is a certain amount of seasoning and time that it takes to grow seasoned professionals and people with good judgment. And that's a global thing. So to pretend that somehow we're different and somehow we can accelerate that process, I think is slightly naive.
When one looks at the definition of sustainability, it is said that sustainability is a process that will continue taking place in the future, provided the costs are not prohibitive. So within that context of the definition of sustainability, if facilitating of BEE transaction actually results in the whole process being very costly and therefore prohibitive, does it then not mean that BEE transactions are actually not sustainable, at least in the current format? The experience that we've had right now with a lot of transactions being underwater suggests that there's a fundamental challenge around the way transactions are structured, and I think part of it is the fact that most of the time BEE players are not able to provide the necessary backing for the transactions that they enter into, and then find themselves in very onerous financing situations, which actually end up giving the shareholding or the benefit out of the whole exercise to the bankers as opposed to the black shareholders. If we are to be honest with ourselves, I don't think that if we are to continue in the current format, we are actually going to achieve what we are trying to achieve. We're not going to have 25% of this economy in black hands unencumbered. Yes, we will have transactions, but 25% unencumbered at the current rate with the current structures we're using, I don't think it's possible in the foreseeable future. We need to learn lessons from what has happened in the past. It's not really working as we had hoped it would. We're not really making the progress that we had hoped we would. And I think it is time that we relooked how we go about achieving this transformation, achieving this transfer of wealth to the majority of people. And we have to find a way that does it in a much more sustainable manner. I don't think the model we've used is sustainable. We cannot go on like this. I think it's going to be too costly. Companies are finding themselves having to do second round, third round BEE transactions. And remember, I did allude to the fact that a lot of these transactions are facilitated, so the costs just keep piling up. It's too costly. But I do think that we've got a significant crop of black professionals now who have got the expertise, who've got the experience, who are actually going out there and starting their own businesses. We are starting to see a very different type of BEE player emerging in the market. Not everybody is keen on owning 5% of a business because they do not get involved in the operational activities of the business. They don't get involved in the decision making of those companies. So it's not actually such an exciting idea to own 5% of a company. Well, of course, we'll buy it if there's an opportunity, but I think really the excitement is more around getting your teeth into it, really having a significant say in how the business operates, and hopefully having some form of influence over the performance of the business, so that when you make an investment, you can, not that you can tell what's going to happen in 3 years' time, but you have a sense of what the real value is to you, and you have some chance of actually driving the business in a particular direction and increasing its chances of actually realizing its potential. I think that's where the excitement for a lot of black entrepreneurs is going to come from going forward.
I always think it's useful to start about the definition of empowerment. And when we're talking about empowerment, what are we actually talking about? And the reason the debates are so contentious and so controversial is that empowerment has got multiple meanings, and it means different things to different people. And I think, unfortunately, some people have tried to close the definition of empowerment. It means different things to different people. For an unemployed person, it means job creation. It might mean microfinance. For the underemployed person, it might mean land reform. If you're in rural agriculture, if you're in the informal sector, it might mean microfinance. For the manager, Jimmy Manyi was supposed to be here. It's about institutional racism. It's about, in the companies, it's about transformation. For the black businessman, the small and medium black businessman, it might be access to procurement. For the BE deal maker that you read about in the press, it might be about acquisition of share deals and buying companies. Now, the problem is that the debate currently has focused mostly on the talking heads who are the managers, the BE deal makers, and so forth. And there's been very little attention paid to the needs of the unemployed and the underemployed. As a rough rule of thumb, we saw the unemployment figures today. There's about a third who are unemployed using the real definition of unemployment, which includes those who are discouraged to look for work. And there's probably another third who are underemployed in the informal sector, domestic work, and so on. And so for me, BE is actually about getting those people to participate in the economy. Now, the people who are on the burning streets of Thokoza, they also want empowerment, but for reasons of expediency, we have decided to close the meaning of BE. When we talk about the BE codes, I think we should recognize that they are just a framework to guide companies in the implementation of BE. The majority of black people do not work in companies that will implement the codes. I did some exercise recently, and for some event, and you find that after all the exclusions of exempted micro enterprises, qualifying small enterprises, the codes actually apply to very few of the people who will be affected by the codes. And if you go through the scorecard that we have, management control, the boards, it'll impact on 5,000 people max. Employment equity will impact maybe on 100,000, 200,000, and so forth. So the codes are a revolutionary, I believe, system of social accounting, but we must recognize them for what they are. They're just a framework to guide the people who are in the first economy. The main point I would like to make is that ownership has got multiple dimensions. The original objective was to deracialize ownership, and the stock exchange is just one measure of the deracialization of ownership. There's also the issue of land ownership. Let's remember that most countries at our stage of development, the first thing they did was to have wide-ranging agrarian reform. And then the other issue is procurement. As Pulu said, many of us do not want to buy 5% in a white company. We need aggressive procurement because the benefits of procurement come from day one. And you're hearing that from many of the black companies that they're very successful. In fact, there are two types of BE companies. You get the guy who buys 5%, 10%, and then you get the guy who grows through procurement. Now, if you look over the last 10, 15 years, the government is a big buyer of IT, information systems and technology, and we have created significantly large black companies in terms of IT. The real reason for the unsustainability of the BE deals is the macroeconomic situation. The interest rate in South Africa is way too high. We have had real interest rates of 10% over the past 15 years, and then the growth rate has been about 3.5%. Now, if the cost of capital, you have to add 10% every single year in real terms, how is this thing ever going to be sustainable? So what we need in South Africa is Alan Greenspan's interest rates, and we need the Asian growth rates. So
I think actually one subtle success of BE is as follows. I think it's just a mere creation of a middle class, a black middle class. For me, that alone is quite a huge success. I think there are so many theories of what a middle class does in any society. They are the consumers, they're the ones who drive all the cars, they have all the debt, they are the ones that borrow, they buy the houses, they are the dynamic component of society. And perhaps we should say BE policies in all its flawed forms has created that black middle class which is necessary for South African economy going forward.